Hey there, YouTubians. I apologize in advance for the sound quality yet again. I'll just have to speak a little bit louder. Yeah, I got a new tablet, and for some reason, I can't use my external microphone on it. It just doesn't pick up the sound. Like, it still uses the actual internal microphone on the device, so that's weird, but I'll have to make do, I suppose. Today I wanted to talk about a rather socially controversial subject, and that is suicide, and how it is perceived in the Wiccan community, at least by my own branch. I always speak from my own beliefs and my own perspective. Um, Now, this is in reaction to something that happened politically in Canada just very, 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 very recently, just in the past couple days here. I didn't think it was going to happen for at least another couple of years. I had no idea it was even in the works. But Canada just passed the law unanimously amongst all 9 of the Supreme Court judges in Canada. Um, for assisted suicide from doctor to patient to be legal. Now, I don't really like the terminology of assisted suicide. I much prefer death by dignity. That's what many people are calling it. You can do research into that and why it's important. I applaud Canada in its decision, and really, I think it's about time. Um, I know a lot of people who have had family and friends that they they suffered in unimaginable ways for way longer than they wanted to, for way longer than anyone else wanted to see them suffer. It made it a much more painful ordeal than it needed to be. Now, this made me start to think about my own beliefs in regards to suicide. Now, Wicca is life affirming. Everything in Wicca is all about life. Life comes first. Experiencing, learning, and acquiring different perspectives. Now, in the tradition that I come from, suicide is basically what you're doing is you're taking this life that you've been given, okay? You're meant to live this life. You're meant to live it to its full course until you die, naturally. To cut it short is to not finish. Now, Wiccans believe in reincarnation and that our next life is somewhat affected by the life that we're living now and the lives that we've lived in the past. Now, it's not quite like Hinduism where, to quote Raj Kutrakali off the Big Bang Theory, another Canadian jewel, the negative actions of one person doesn't necessarily mean that in the next incarnation they will be a banana slug. But yeah, it's not exactly how Wiccans see it. It's more so the attachments that you create, that you do or do not learn from, kind of affect the events and the circumstances of the next life that you are to live or the next couple lives. And depending on what and how much you learn from those attachments, you will or will not move forward or to the left or to the right. Now, suicide, at least when there is another option, when you don't have to, when it's not like, the whole assisted suicide thing, usually it goes hand in hand with someone being on life support and terminally ill, and there's just absolutely nothing for anyone to do to make them feel better or to make them get better at all. It's just death is coming, and you're basically just prolonging the inevitable unnecessarily. Now, suicide, in the sense that I'm talking about with Wicca, is more so like a lot of teen suicides that happen, and a lot of people that are depressed. Don't get me wrong. I know depression. Depression is not sadness. Now here's a little disclaimer. This is probably going to be a fairly lengthy discussion, I guess, on this subject. So prepare yourself. Depression is not sadness. Don't confuse yourself. If you're sad, you're not depressed. If you're really sad, you're not depressed. If you're sadder than you've ever been in your entire life, you're not depressed. Depression. See, sadness feels like when someone, like as if your entire emotional body has just been burned and everything just feels that much more. You feel it more. You're tender. It hurts more. Depression is after that. Sadness can bring depression, but any emotion that's too extreme for too long can also bring depression. Depression is the complete and total lack of emotions. That is depression. It's when you are emotionally dead and you just feel, what's the point? Like, why? Why go on? That is depression right there. And it's hard. It's hard. I know it's hard. You should have seen me about 5 or 6 years ago. Was not pretty. But do I think that warrants suicide? I don't. A lot of people probably think differently, and you're free to. But from the Wiccan perspective that I come from, you're going through depression is sacred. Depression is sacred, okay? You learn more about yourself through depression than you do in any other time, save maybe grieving. Grieving is also very important. You learn a lot about yourself in grieving that you don't learn about yourself in any other way. It's important. When you are depressed, you need to learn something. And it's hard. It's really, really hard. And I know the thoughts that go through the brains of people that are suicidal. I know those thoughts. I know that game of devil's advocate that you play with yourself. I know that feeling of being burdensome to your loved ones and to your peers. I know that feeling. And I know the feeling of it's never going to get better. And sometimes it takes a really long time for things to get better. But they do. They do. And even if they don't, they do. Okay? Even if it ends in the worst possible way, as long as it's not by your own hand, it gets better. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary issue. The purpose of the life you're living is to live it, okay? Now, it's important to work through the difficult parts. What do Wiccans believe, or at least what do Wiccans of my perspective believe happens when and if someone commits suicide? Well, think about it. We're here to learn. Okay, we learn based off of our attachments, based off of what keeps drawing us back. We learn from that. They keep happening to us. It keeps being drawn back to us until we've learned the lesson that is meant to be learned from that attachment. And then another one comes, and we learn more and more and more until there's just nothing left. And if you cut yourself off halfway, you're just going to have to go back. It's going to keep coming back to you. You can push it away. You can say, no, I'm not going to keep going. But guess what? It is still going to keep going. It's going to happen. You need to learn the lesson. If you don't learn the lesson, if you keep just cutting it off, guess what? It's going to grow back until you disintegrate it. You know what I'm talking about here? If you don't resolve those karmic attachments, they're still there. You can try to end it yourself without learning the lesson, but guess what? If you haven't learned the lesson, there's still a lesson to be learned, and you will live it. Basically, what I'm saying is if you end your life by your own hand, you're going to relive it. Maybe not in the exact same circumstances, but very, very, very similar ones. So you kill yourself in the 80s, that doesn't mean you're going to go back and relive the 80s, okay? It means you're going to live a life with very similar circumstances, very similar events will occur, very similar patterns will emerge, and you'll just have to learn the lesson. The lesson is still there. If you don't learn it, it's going to keep coming back. The universe doesn't give you anything that you can't deal with, okay? And when it does, you deal with it. You deal with it, and the world goes around and around and around. That to me is comforting. That is largely what keeps me here. Believe me when I say, if it weren't for many of my spiritual precepts and beliefs, I don't know if I would be here, guys. I don't. And for that, I'm grateful for my path. I'm glad that I have found the perspective on life that I have now. I hope others can see it. I know not everyone agrees, but enjoy your life, even the bad parts, because the bad parts teach you more. And if everything was good all the time, nothing would be. Remember that. You can't have the light without the dark. You can't have the God without the goddess. You can't have happiness without sadness. You can't have anger without joy. You need everything that happens. Okay? So, with that, I'll leave you. Thank you for listening. Until next time, merry part, and blessed be.